Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. It happened in 2002. I was living in a ground floor apartment in the corner of an L-shaped building with a living room, kitchen, parents' bedroom on the garden balcony side, and my sister's bedroom and bathroom on the parking side. I was 7 years old at the time of the facts, and all this happened over several weeks, maybe months, but I hope not. At the beginning of the summer of 2002, I was often playing in the common gardens of the building with other children of the building, when one afternoon, my mother called me and my friends to ask us if it was one of us who, to play, would have taken one of her panties that was drying on the floor of our terrace, and that it was not right to play with women's underwear. But it wasn't us. And as the weeks went by, several similar cases were reported to us, but always without explanation. Sometime after these events, my father, not being able to sleep, one evening decided to smoke a cigarette at the kitchen's window, which was at the side of the garden, and he was just looking around to clear his mind. As he looked closer at our right neighbor's terrace, my father saw a man standing there, not moving, and looking into their apartment. My father thought that it was the neighbor and said, "So, what are you doing, bud?" The person turned around and looked at my father. The man was touching himself. Then, without saying anything, the intruder ran through the hedge and left through the common gardens. The whole neighborhood was informed, and this could not last any longer. We children were forbidden to play outside in the evening, and a feeling of fear settled in among the people of the ground floor. During the year, a new neighbor moved in alone in the apartment, which was above ours. Alerted and a little shocked by the incessant theft of women's underwear in our building, my neighbor legally, and with good reason for my part, bought a dissuasion gun, which shoots and weighs like a real one, but actually shoots blanks, and she kept it in her bedside table. This neighbor loved animals and had 2 parakeets, which often made noise in a birdcage on her balcony. She had cats, fish, and etc. One evening, this neighbor came back from work. She put her things down and went about her life normally, like any other person coming home from work does. But that evening, she saw on her balcony that unfortunately, the bird cage had remained open and that her parakeets had disappeared. Thinking that it was her own mistake, she was sad, but there was no reason to be afraid at all. After having made her evening, she went to bed and fell asleep. But something woke her up during the night. First, she felt her comforter pull slightly. Thinking it was a cat, she held the comforter tightly, but it still pulled. Then she felt the bed move and a breath behind her. There was someone in her bed. The feeling of fear took a hold of her. She jumped out of bed while opening her bedside table and took out her pistol and fired twice in the direction of the man, who fled by jumping out of her bedroom window, which was open. The whole building was awakened by these shots, including my father, who saw a man land in front of our terrace and run into the gardens. He grabbed what he could and then chased him. The police stopped my father, who was running in his underwear with a golf putter, and of course, he had to prove that he was a neighbor afterwards. A couple minutes later, the police informed us of the arrest of the man in the housing estate next to us by a patrol that was watching our neighborhood after his thefts of underwear. Our surprise was not the least when we learned that the pervert was a man of 45 years, married, father of 3 children, and in recidivism of several acts of voyeurism and break-ins. He had even entered a lady's house by climbing up the balconies while she was living on the 4th floor. Later, we learned that no charges would have been retained against him because number 1, he did not break into my neighbor's house. He did not assault, rape, or even touch my neighbor. And they're not even sure that the thefts are necessarily attributed to him. So, here we are, living in a country where a person with serious voyeuristic urges that lead to other more serious things cannot be supervised by prison or hospital staff because technically he didn't do anything. Stalker at K-Mart. I'm dating myself there with that department store reference, but I'll do one better. When I was in my early teens, I'm a male, and I would ride my bicycle there to look at and buy model cars and supplies. That was my thing back then, building model cars. I can't say if I was in any real danger, as per the TOU on the sub, but basically, I was stalked. And while I'm deciding between the 66 Chevelle or the 85 Camaro, I see this man, mid-30s, walk past the aisle that I'm on. Then, he passes the same aisle from the other end. Once I'd made up my mind and leave the aisle, he's on the far end and starts walking the parallel aisle to me. I'm not weirded out yet, but I make a detour down another aisle to ditch him. Or so I thought. I doubled back and got to the main aisle that heads towards the front, towards the registers. He pops out another aisle further up facing me, then turns down the next one. Each time that I encounter him, he smiles, making eye contact. So, I put the model down and turn 180 degrees, head towards the back of the store. There's a service entrance back there, so I make for that, thinking that I'd lost or confuse him. And I still wanted to build that Camaro. So, I went back towards the front. And there he is, sitting on a bench in the lobby, still making contact, still smiling. Now, at this point, the obvious answer would have been to just turn and bolt. But in an effort to keep my bike from getting stolen, I'd secured it to the railing inside the lobby, and I didn't want to stand still in his presence. I quickly went back into the store and zigzagged the aisles trying to lose him. By now, I was sufficiently freaked out, but still didn't want to make a scene. Every single time that I made my way back out onto the main aisle, there he was. I'm walking at a brisk pace, and he's just casually strolling, but always in my direction. And at one point, I pass the sporting goods, so I pick up and start carrying a baseball bat. I pass the main aisle on purpose now, showing him my weapon. He's unfazed, just casually making his way up and down the aisles, still smiling, still eye contact. I'm just short of running now, almost back in the service department. When he's given up the subterfuge of chance encounters, he's directly following me. He's not at my pace, but manages to keep up. I give up. I toss the bat and make for the service clerk, a relatively stout African-American man, and I say, "Hey, I think this guy is following me. Can you call someone?" And I'm throwing my thumb in his direction. He hadn't come around the corner yet, so I never saw his reaction. But we heard a crashing and heavy fast footfalls. He had run towards the service entrance, knocking over a display on the way out. The service rider stood by with me while the police were called. and once there, the cops took a statement, did a walk around, but he was long gone. Then, they put my bike in their cruiser and then drove me home. I didn't go back to K-Mart on my own again until I was old enough to drive. And I still never went back for that model Camaro. Damn it.
Stalked me using technology. When I was in my early 20s, I dated a friend of a friend. We were mutual friends. We saw each other before, but we never really interacted. We certainly knew each other by name. We met at a party and he was great at first. He was friendly and made good conversation and was pretty good looking too. I was instantly interested in him and we had great chemistry with each other. We met up constantly and I was so happy I decided to give him a chance. Months in, we decided to go steady and be exclusive with each other. We set our statuses on Facebook and some other places too. We took so many pictures together and posted them on social media. And for nearly 10 months things were going fantastic. He slept over my place plenty of times and I stayed at his too. I really enjoyed being with him. One day I wasn't feeling the best, so I told him I wanted a quiet day and spent the day on my computer in a video call with my friends. We were all laughing and watching a movie together. It was so good to have some girl time together because I spent so much time with my boyfriend. One of my friends, I'll call her Dana, made a comment about missing me and jokingly said that I was spending way too much time with him. The next day I didn't hear from my ex, and it wasn't like him to not send a message by now. I messaged him and said good morning. He looked at it and left me on read. Weird, but maybe he was too busy to answer, and I didn't worry about it. I waited a couple of hours and sent another message to ask if he was okay. He told me he was fine, and I knew he was clearly not fine. He'd never acted like this before and I was surprised by it. I told him if he was angry with me, I'd rather he told me why. He asked how sick I was and I told him it must have been a temporary stomach bug. And that when I felt a little better, I went on a video call with my friends and we watched a movie. He seemed satisfied by my answer. And at the time I wasn't exactly sure why. I was just happy that he had calmed down. Things were good again. But months later we had some more relationship difficulties. He told me he didn't like some of my friends and that he didn't want me to see them anymore. I asked him exactly what he didn't like about them. He just told me he didn't think they were a good fit for me, but wouldn't explain exactly why. There was one person in particular he didn't like, and that was Dana. He always made little nasty comments about her, implying that she was a bad person. I told him I needed a reason why he wanted me to cut them off, and I didn't like him interfering with my friendships. He scowled and didn't speak to me for a couple of days. I talked to Dana about it, and she wasn't sure where the hostility was coming from. She had always been civil with him. I thought that would be the end of it, but no. He slipped one time and mentioned something I told Dana in private. I thought maybe Dana said it to someone else and asked her about it. She denied it. I was angry about this and he supported me, told me to stop being friends with her, and if I loved him, I would do it. I hated that. I vented to some of my friends both on my phone and on the computer about it. I said how frustrated I was, that he had no right to do what he did, and that it wasn't fair of him to do this. When he confronted me about it, he knew near enough everything I said. I doubted all my friends would have run off to tell him, and some of them barely knew him, or only knew of him. I asked how he knew and he got incredibly defensive. This went on for months, and whenever we had any issues he would always know about them. It turns out he put spyware on my phone and a keylogger on my computer. Probably when I wasn't looking or he needed to borrow my phone or computer for something. I confronted him about this massive breach of privacy and he said it was normal. That all couples do this. I screamed at him this wasn't normal at all. He told me that all his exes had been fine with it. And I reminded him that he never even mentioned it to me. And I certainly wouldn't have agreed. Nor did he ever offer to show me his phone or other devices. I got my computer and phone cleared of any nasties, changed passwords, and did everything I could to protect myself. I made sure I changed all my passwords at a friend's place too. After a while, I couldn't relax, so I ended up getting a new phone and computer when I could. I couldn't shake the feeling he was spying on me for a long time after. I make sure to lock all my devices now. I also regularly check to make sure my information hasn't been leaked, and made sure there were no changes to my private information. It has been so stressful, and it could have been avoided if I was more careful. What was even creepier, he left hidden cameras in my room at some point. I'm terrified what he did with those pictures or videos. I change in there. I have so many private moments in there. It's supposed to be my sanctuary. Sometimes I can't escape the feeling I'm being watched. This story won't be the worst story on your list, I guess. I don't let my partners use my devices anymore, unless I'm there to keep an eye on what they're doing. I don't like how he invaded my privacy and had access to my information without my permission. I don't even like inviting people into my room anymore. I just want to feel safe again. Keep an eye on your devices, people.
So I'm a 28-year-old woman, and this happened to me when I was 13. I'm an adult now, and still kind of traumatized. For a little context, at 13, I transferred schools because of a lack of money. The school that I went to was a cheaper private school because where I live, the public ones kinda suck. I didn't have any friends for at least the first couple of months. I then started noticing this boy, Victor. He was always staring at me during classes, in the hallways by the window, and at lunch. It was an everyday thing, but I didn't care because as a kid, I only thought of stupid stuff like dolls or whatever. Oh, and one more thing. I was flat as a table back then, so totally looked like a small child. The girls in my class started saying that Victor had a crush on me, which creeped the hell out of me because he was 18. I was creeped out but still didn't care as long as he didn't approach me or anything. But things escalated quickly. Victor would follow me home every day, and thank God I moved since then, and he doesn't know where I live anymore. The most annoying thing, however, was that he constantly asked his friends to try to talk to me and try to convince me to go out with him and make out with him after school. These talks would usually take about 30 minutes of them trying so hard to convince me to agree with this, while Victor was behind them, just watching the conversation like a freak. Obviously, I rejected him all the time, but being the nice guy that he said he was, he spread rumors about us making out anyway. Nobody believed anyway because he was such a weird guy and the whole school knew it. The final straw was when our school had a trip to a book fair. I was super excited. At this point, I had made a couple of friends, and on our way to this fair, I was on the bus with my friend and Victor was on 3 seats behind us, and I could feel his eyes on me the whole way. And out of nowhere, he came and asked for my friend's cell phone and she gave it to him. So stupid of her. And he returned her cell phone not even 2 minutes after. She checked the cell phone and showed me that he had taken a bunch of photos of me. I guess this was his way of saying that he had already done this at some point. She got so pissed and went to go talk to him. And when she returned, she said the creepiest thing I've heard in my life. She said this with a very scared face. He said to me that when you least expect it, he will push you in a bathroom and rape you today." The only thing that went through my mind was, what should I do now? I looked at him and he gave me a creepy smile. After this, I spent the whole day looking behind my back, not leaving the side of my teacher. She didn't even understand why that I didn't want to walk around the fair. I was in alert mode all the time, and thank God, nothing happened. And when I came home, I cried in my room like a baby. This was at the end of the year, and thankfully, I switched schools again. I told this to my mom last year, and she was like, "Yeah, it happens. It happened to me too when I was your age." So shocked about how this is a common thing. I'm now 28, and I still see Victor on the streets. He has followed me around a few times, and I always walk in circles until I lost him. But sometimes, he waits for me outside the stores or restaurants. I think about what would have happened to me in that book fair if I didn't have my teacher next to me the whole time. And I wondered if one day he'll do something or just keep this creepy behavior. Back when I was attending a university, I used to work on campus at one of the dining halls during the dinner or night shift. I lived in the next town over since it was cheaper to live in a crappy little apartment out of town than to live on campus in the dorms. But I didn't own a car, so I had to take the bus. One night, I had just gotten off a shift at work. My feet were killing me, and I was completely exhausted as I slowly made my way to the bus stop. I noticed a man much older than me sitting on one of the two benches at the otherwise empty bus stop, but I didn't pay too much attention to him. I simply sat down on the second bench and listened to some music while waiting for the bus to arrive. The first sign that things were starting to get weird was when I kept noticing out of the corner of my eye that he was staring at me. At first, I thought I might be imagining it, so I looked over and caught him quickly turning his head to look away. Okay, so he was staring at me. This wasn't completely out of the ordinary, since being a young college girl seemed to gain me a bit of attention from older men. So just like usual, I just ignored him. Well, that was a mistake. Again, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him look at me. But instead of just staring this time, he got up and walked over to sit next to me instead. I continued listening to my music, hoping that he would see the earbuds and take the hint that I wasn't interested in having a conversation. But instead, this man literally took the earbud out of my ear. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said, as my head snapped to look at him in shock. I should have told him off for touching my things and demanded him to leave me alone. But I was sort of frozen, and I didn't want to make him mad. Hi," I replied quietly. He started introducing himself as Mike and telling me that he lived in the area and it was always nice to see pretty girls like me at the university bus stop. He explained that he was a real man and liked the boys that I went to school with and that I should go home with him that night. I was a shy, scared virgin who had never had a man be as bold as this to my face. And I say to my face because I had certainly gotten my fair share of unsolicited private pictures online by that point. But I digress. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. But that didn't stop Mike from continuing to explain to me all of the fun things that he wanted to do with me at his place that night. He got into graphic detail. The things he described started out with the basic things you'd expect, and then escalated to him asking if I liked being choked until I turned purple and passed out in bed. I wish there was anyone else at that bus stop, but it was just the two of us, in the dark alone, as I counted the seconds until the bus would arrive. Then Mike took things to a different level of shocking by telling me, "Listen, the demons want me to ask for your phone number, and they say you should give it to me, or you won't like what happens." He actually had the audacity to start stroking my hair. His hand was gentle, but I didn't want him touching me at all. This was shocking for a number of reasons. The demons? I wouldn't like what would happen? Why was he touching me? What the hell was this guy talking about? And as though he could read my mind, Mike went on to explain. "My therapist knows the demons are real. I told her about them, and she says I'm not crazy and that demons are real." He laughed, then abruptly stopped and said, "Now, give me your phone number like they said," he demanded. And as his hand stroked my hair for the last time, he stopped and gripped the back of my neck, still gentle, but even more terrifying. I was scared and obviously didn't want him to have my phone number, but he was taking out his phone, and I knew that he was going to call the number I gave him to make sure that I wasn't lying to him, and he still had his hand on the back of my neck. So, I reluctantly gave him my real phone number. Stupid, I know, but I was right, and he immediately called to check. All I could think about was just not making this guy angry long enough to get away from him, and then I would block his number. Thankfully, the bus came moments later, and I sat down as close to the front of the bus, near the bus driver, as I possibly could, since the bus was basically empty. Mike decided to sit directly across from me, and at this point, I had tried listening to music again, hoping that being on the bus and him having my phone number would signal to him the end of our conversation. However, he decided to reach over and unzip my sweatshirt, revealing my work shirt and the name tag, which I had unfortunately forgotten to remove in my haste to leave work that night. I hadn't told him my name yet. Abigail. What a beautiful name. Our daughter will be named Celeste. I shouldn't have been shocked at this point, but I was. I had stopped listening to music again and zipped my sweatshirt back up, which made him laugh. "You won't need that soon anyway," he said, and winked at me, implying how he'd planned to undress me even further that night. At one stop, Mike tried to convince me to get off the bus with him. I told him no, that I was tired and I just wanted to go home. So he said okay and then stayed on the bus. I knew that had been his stop, so the fact that he was staying on the bus worried me. I was sure this meant that he was planning on coming home with me instead. "Baby," Mike whispered to me. I tried to ignore him, but he repeated himself louder. "Baby." He had the most unsettling smile on his face, and I asked, "What?" He laughed and told me, "The demons say you smell nice." I was terrified, and I felt like I was going to throw up by the time that my bus stop arrived. I lived in an apartment alone, and I didn't want him to know where I lived. Despite my body being exhausted and sore from work, adrenaline kicked in, and I bolted off the bus and ran straight home. I made it inside and then locked the door. I looked through the peephole, and I didn't see him, so I went to carefully peek out of my window and saw him standing near the bus stop just looking around. He took out his phone, and sure enough, I started getting a call from an unknown number since I hadn't saved his number. I ignored it, and when he hung up, I started getting several texts asking where I'd gone and how he didn't like hide and seek, and how the demons just wanted to have fun, but I was being a little bitch about it. I was so scared because he knew which apartment building I lived in, where I worked, where I went to school, my phone number, and my name. The only good thing which made me feel slightly relieved was that he didn't know which specific apartment number I lived in. That's when he started yelling outside. There were no specific words said, just wordless yells of what I can only assume were frustration and anger. I blocked his number, and I kept all the lights in my apartment off as I cried with my back to the front door. Maybe I should have called the police, but my brain was so frazzled that I didn't even think of that until the next day. And by then, all I knew about him was that he was a mentally unstable man, probably named Mike, who hadn't actually done any physical harm to me, so I didn't think it was worth it. In hindsight, I know that I made a lot of stupid mistakes during this experience. I ended up moving away entirely at the end of that term of school, for unrelated reasons. But until then, I switched to day shifts at work, and I was paranoid every single night. Thankfully, I never saw the man again though. So Mike, the scary guy from the bus stop who tried to follow me home, I never want to meet you or your demons ever again. And here are the top comments for my last video. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.